Hello, welcome to installing XAMPP server and WordPress. So we're going to be using a local server. This is why we're installing XAMPP. XAMPP is a server package that allows us to run server-side scripting such as PHP, which is needed by WordPress. So we're going to be installing WordPress locally on our machine, and then we're going to continue with installing WooCommerce and configuring WooCommerce and so on. So the first thing we need to do is install our server. So I'm using Chrome, going to install XAMPP. So this is a package which has numerous software that allows us to run a server, a web server on our PC, and also includes other software such as PHP interpreter, so it allows us to run PHP on our server, and also includes a database. So WordPress will require to store everything onto a database, so we're going to need a database to store all the WordPress data as well as the WooCommerce data. So the first thing we need to do is install, like I said, this web server software package. So XAMPP is just one of the software which you can install. I think there's something called XAMPP, so XAMPP server. So this is Windows. If you're using Linux, you're going to need LAMP, I think. LAMP server. Yep. LAMP. And if you're running Mac, then good luck with you. So we're going to be using Windows. I'll try and make a separate video for Mac installing the server on Mac. Right, so there's also something called Easy PHP, which you can download and become familiar with. This is just another server package. So those are some server packages you can install. This again is a Windows operating system. So I'm going to be using XAMPP. So I just go to the XAMPP website. I just want to download the latest version. So you can see here there is a version for OS if you're running Apple machine. So I'm just going to download the latest version and let that run. Okay, so it's now downloaded. So I'm just going to run it directly from this. If, of course, you can't do that, just press yes. If you can't do that, obviously it's in the downloads area. And you can run it from there. So I'm going to get rid of the browser because we don't need that anymore. So important because blah 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 blah. Okay. So press OK and press next. So here we don't need Perl, so we get rid of that. Programming languages, we don't need these things here, and we don't need Tomcat because we're going to be using Apache. We don't need a mail server, and we don't need an FTP server. So it doesn't matter if you deselect those or not. It's not going to affect our installation and process in this series, but it just means we're installing less things. It could take less time to install. So here you can see that default installation is C, directly on the C drive, on the root directory of your C drive. So I'll just show you that. So it's going to be in here. So I recommend you install it there for now, unless you're an advanced user and you know what you're doing. So press next. I don't need to learn more. Press next and next. Okay, so I've let that install. You can see that I've now got this Windows alert. So I'm just going to allow access so that Apache, which is the web server software, is allowed to run on this computer. So allow access there. And do you want to start the control panel now? I'm going to deselect that for now because I'm going to show you manually how this works. So I'm going to press finish. Okay, so now it's installed. It's not running at all. So if you want to start this program, you simply just need to go to your C drive. So open the file Explorer, I go to this PC, and if you remember, we installed it on the C drive. So here's the folder for XAMPP. inside of here you've got loads of files. So there's not too much here that you need to know really, and we go through this obviously step by step as we go through the series, but what we need to start off with is starting and stopping the server package. So just again to reiterate, XAMPP includes all the software we need, a web server so that we can serve web pages locally. It has PHP interpreter so we can run PHP language or PHP code on our server, because WordPress is made with PHP. And we need a database. So that's what we've just installed with XAMPP. So if I start XAMPP by going to XAMPP control, I press save because I want it in English language. And now we've got the control panel. Now you don't need this control panel, you could just press start here, but the problem with that is that you don't get some of the feedback or some of the reports, and if there's any issues you don't see what's going on. So by opening up the control panel, we can start Apache, which is the web server which we're going to need, and we can start MySQL, which is the database. Now here I'm just going to allow access to that, so that's safe, and now you can see that they've gone green. So I've got two green modules here, so that means the service is running and we're good to go. So if yours is red or orange, there's a problem. Now one of the problems that you might have is that these ports here are doors in and out of the network, for example. So some other services like Skype or other software you might have running utilize these ports too. So that can cause conflicts. So it might be that if you have an orange or a red here, just disable some of the software that you're running by going down here, right clicking, closing some software, and then just run the software again to see if it works. That's the best thing to do. So now we've got the software running, just very quickly, let's just become familiar with how to access both the web server, file directory, and the database. So I can just minimize that and now close. I'll keep this open and I'll go to the browser because we know that the server is running. So how do we access the server? So the first thing we do is type in 127.0.0.1. This is the loopback address for our computer. So that takes us to what you should see if your server is running, this page here. So we can also type in local host and it takes us to the same place. So what's important here is that we're not typing in folder and file locations, because that's just going to open the file directly. And that's okay with HTML and CSS, that will still run okay, but because we're going to be using PHP, we need this server to manage and to take over so that PHP can run in our page or on our web browser. That's something we don't need to go into too much detail. You just need to ensure that you understand that how to turn the server on and to make sure that we use either localhost or the loopback address. So I'm going to be using the localhost to access my web server. So a web server is basically a folder, somewhere where you can store folder and files. So if I go back to my C drive and then open XAMPP, the root directory of where all the web files should be stored is in this folder called htdocs. So inside of here are all the files. If you wanted to build a website, this is where you need to put the files. Now the first thing you can do is just get rid of all these files. So I've just deleted them. And if I refresh the page now, you can see that, well, we don't have dashboard anymore because I've just deleted that. And now I can go back to the root directory of my server, which is this. So this page here, or this directory here, represents this folder here. Now if I were to quickly build a web page, I don't have any IDEs installed, so I'm just going to do it this way. So if I quickly build a web page and press save, so I now have a web page. So I just type something into that. Whoops. So just open up a notepad and just type in hello. world. There we go. So this is my file that I've just made. So just to prove that this directory here, this localhost domain, if you think of this as the domain name, bbc.co.uk.com, google.com and so on, this is what I'm typing in here to access this, my server, my root directory of the server. So now I've got index in place. It should just run that by default. There we go, hello world. So it's now serving like it would do a normal web page, like every single website, more or less every single website in the world is being served by my server. So I call it index because the server knows to look for a page called index.html to begin with. So if I rename this to this, for example, and refreshed, you can see that it doesn't serve the page because it's looking for a page by default, index or home.html, the server is. So it's important that you build your home page and you call it index. Right. So obviously I can click on this and it will serve it too. Okay, so that's the server. That's roughly how it works. That's all we really need to know about that because we're going to install WordPress into there in a minute and it's got all the files that we need. So the second thing we need to know about is the database, how to access the database. So we're going to need to set up a database for WordPress. So we're going to now go into the database by typing in phpMyAdmin. And that's going to take us to phpMyAdmin. There we go. So this is a graphical user interface software that allows us to interface with the database that's been installed by XAMPP. So you can see here we've got some schemas, database schemas here. Just ignore all of this. You can see that we've got this database here called test. We can ignore that too. So if I double click here, notice that it takes me to this page. So I've double clicked on this icon here, test, and it's taken me to this page. And what I can do now is drop this database, so remove the database. So that's how to remove a database. That's a good thing to know. So let's build a new database for WordPress. So all I need to do for WordPress is press new, type in a name of a new database, press create, and there we go. That's all we need to know about building a database for WordPress. So if I double click, I can delete that and so on. Obviously, I don't want to do that. Okay, right, so that's all we need to know there. So we're now ready to install WordPress. So let's go over to WordPress. So we need to go over to wordpress.com just to quickly show you the difference. So there's two types of services that WordPress offer. We can go to wordpress.com and we can start building a website there, and it has WordPress installed, and it's like an online platform where you can use WordPress, and it's all managed by wordpress.com. So that's the online side of WordPress, and we can use WordPress in that environment. But obviously we're going to install it into our computer or onto our computer in our server environment. So we don't need to use this service. So let's not get confused with that. What we're going to do is we're going to install WordPress instead. So we go to wordpress.org and we select get WordPress. And you can see we've got download WordPress 5.3.2. So we're going to download that. Hooray. Okay, so WordPress is downloaded. So like before, I'm just going to remove this and open it up in the download area. So open up the downloads area, and I'm just going to remove XAMPP. So what I'm going to do here is just right click. I don't have any packages installed other than Windows here. Default compress software. So I'm just going to extract all, sorry, and press extract. So that's going to take a while. Okay, so now that's extracted. It's important to, this window opens when it's extracted. First thing to do is close that window, and I'm just going to delete WordPress compressed file, and that leaves me with the folder that's just been decompressed. So I go into there, excuse me. I go into there, I've got a folder called WordPress, and I go into that one, and you can see these are all the files that make up WordPress. So I'm going to select them all, copy them all, or cut them all, and then select this PC, go to my C drive, go to XAMPP, and remember the root directory of my server is the htdocs area. And inside of this, I'm going to paste all those files. So this, like I said, is WordPress. All these files here make up WordPress. So that's all I need to do with that. I don't need to do anything else. I might delete the README because I don't need that. So now I've done that, I'm going to close the WordPress tab, and I'm now going to open it. I don't know why I did that, but I'm going to open up a new tab and type in localhost. There we go. And notice now, as long as you've got all the files in the root directory like this, you're going to be presented with this screen. So this is the WordPress setup installation steps. Okay, I press continue if you want it in English, and I press let's go. Okay, so this is the trickiest bit of the installation. I need to know some details here. So the first thing is I need to know the database name. Well, I know it because I've made it earlier. It's called WP. Okay, so this was the database we made earlier, WP. So I just go back here and I type in WP. And now I need a username and password. So what you need to understand here is that when this database was installed, by default, there is a user and a password. So that user basically allows access to these databases. So a more advanced view of databases is that you might have many databases. Now you don't just have one user who can access every database. You would set up a different user to allow access to different databases. And that's kind of a good security practice. So just understand that this software, the database requires access or privileges. And the default user for this database is a user called root, and the password, well, there isn't a password. Okay, so that's what you need to set up. You can add new users if you wanted to, but that's something you don't need to do potentially if you're working on your own machine and developing on your own machine. So that's all we need there. The database host is localhost. That's where the database is. So for example, if the database was on the internet somewhere, we might type in an IP address here. So the database is actually running on our computer, which is localhost. So we type in localhost. We could probably type in 127.0.0.1 again there, but let's just stick with localhost. And the table prefix is basically a lot of tables are going to be developed. So this database is going to be developed or created in a minute by WordPress. So those database tables have certain names, and we can have a prefix before that name if we wanted to. So for example, if we're using one database and we have multiple installations of WordPress, we could say WordPress 1 and then the name of the database table, because that allows us then to have multiple WordPress installations on one database. But again, that's not something that we need to worry about at the moment. So we can just leave that as it is and press submit. Okay, so as long as it says, all right, Sparky blah, we can now run the installation and type some things. So this is this is all things you can change later on. So the username. So this is the most important thing here. So what you'll have with WordPress is obviously the website that you can view, as everyone can, but you'll have like a management area, an admin area for WordPress. And in order to get into that admin area, you're going to need a username and password. So I'm just going to type in admin and then admin, just because it's easy to remember, and I'm working locally, so no one else is going to be able to access this. Obviously, this is not recommended if you're working on a server elsewhere. So I'm going to confirm that I'm using a weak password, and I'm going to type in an email address. Again, it doesn't matter because I'm working locally. and just press install. Just make sure you remember that later on. So that's now going to prompt WordPress to install. And if I go back to my database now, you'll find I've got lots of tables. So that's what's just been created by WordPress. If I go into users, you can see I've got a user called admin, and then I've got this this key here which represents the word admin. So username and password. So that's what the user I just created, for example. So we can now log in. So when we press login, that takes us to the WordPress login area. So this is something we need to remember. So let's just go back to localhost. So to access our website, remember it's localhost or 127.0.01. It's the same thing. Now, if we want to access the admin area of our website, we need to remember WP admin. So we need to type WP admin. That takes us to the admin area. So that's two things you need to remember, or just one thing you need to remember, how to access the admin area. Now my username was admin, password was admin. So then I log in, and there we go. WordPress is installed and we're ready to go. So for a little bonus then, if you've not used WordPress before, welcome to WordPress. This is how WordPress roughly works. So WordPress is a dynamic, I would call it a dynamic piece of software, in that we can change this into absolutely anything we want it to be. So if we want it to be an e-commerce store, it can be. If we want it to be a blog platform, well, it already is, almost. If we want it to be anything else, a company website, we can build this into absolutely anything we want. And the reason we can do this is because the most powerful element here in WordPress is probably plugins. So plugins, other people have created bits of software that we can plug into our WordPress installation, and we can then make it into, it then adds functionality to WordPress to allow us to do different things. And obviously this series is about WooCommerce. So eventually in the next videos, we're going to install WooCommerce and get it set up, and that's a plugin. So that's a big area. So the second thing to know about WordPress is that we have appearances. So if I just right click and open this in a new tab, I like to have the actual website open and admin open all the time. Makes it easy to work. So we have appearance. So this is where we can install different different themes. So this is probably, again, a very powerful feature of WordPress, and why it's probably so popular on the internet, or popular for developers, because you can just buy themes and just install them and then change a few things about, and there we go. You've got a website and it's working beautifully. So here we've got this theme here, and this theme represents this theme here, and it's installed. So I can activate this one if I wanted to. So now it's active. If I refresh this page, you can see that, wow, I've got a new theme, and so on. So these are just the default themes that are built in. I can go to add new and search all the themes that are available. So if I wanted a a bag theme, wow, there are some themes here, and all I need to do is press install. They get downloaded to this computer or to this server, and then I basically just go back to themes. It will appear here somewhere, and then I press activate. It's as simple as that if I wanted to change the theme. And like I said, there are paid themes, so you can go to websites and buy themes, premium themes, and that can help speed up the process of building and developing websites. So for WooCommerce, you'll find that we'll need to download a specific WooCommerce theme that allows interactivity with the WooCommerce plugin. So we'll do that again at a later stage. So the last thing, or one of the last things to tell you, is WordPress has posts. So this is important. So posts are basically bits of information that we can display on the page. I like to look at it that way. So here, for example, by default, I guess WordPress is still considered some sort of blogging platform. So imagine this is a blog entry of our website. So I want to add a new blog entry. So I'll call it news today, and then I can start writing this is what happened today, and then I just publish that, and then you'll find if you refresh the page, I have a new blog entry in this case, and then I can click on the blog entry or snippet, and that takes me to the individual page where I might see more information. So that's a post. So with WooCommerce, obviously we're going to be building, or we're going to need some items in the store. And I guess that's where it's going to be posts are going to kind of turn into items. So let's just go back to a database so we can see what's happening in the database. So posts. So if I go into posts, you can see that I've got Hello World, and remember I made news today. So there's news today created. So everything's been stored in the database. So I just wanted to show you that this is an important feature of WordPress, because everything gets stored in the database. So one thing to consider, I like doing, is maybe personal preferences. This admin bar kind of gets in my way when I'm developing. So to turn that off, simply go to Users, Admin, Edit, and then the toolbar. I want to deselect the toolbar so it doesn't show when I'm viewing the site, update my profile, and then go back to my website, press refresh, and it's gone. So that's one thing to get off potentially. So there we go. So we've installed XAMPP, we've looked around the server package, and we've installed or created a database, and then we've installed WordPress.